George Arlotto, Superintendent of Anne Arundel County Public Schools, and I'm delighted that you're here today and participating in this excellent opportunity. I talk a lot about how amazing our students are and about the power of partnerships. The program you're about to see, Coping with Anxiety Youth 2020, is a perfect example of that. It combines the voices of students, school system officials, and some of our partners to discuss one of the most critical issues confronting students today. I appreciate all the time they put into this because these conversations are what lead to better outcomes for children. Thank you again for joining us for this important conversation.
Hey, my name is Stuart Pittman. I'm the County Executive of Anne Arundel County, and sorry I'm not with you. I know that you're having a meeting, Healthy Dialogues Coping with Anxiety, and you have a really great panel of people who I have a lot of respect for, who have a fair amount of life experience between them, and I hope you get a lot out of this. I always look back on when I wasn't so old and remember the kind of anxieties that I had then, some of which I still have and probably never go away. But I do think it gets better as you sort of figure out where you fit into this crazy world that my generation has created and the generations before us have created. And one of the things that gives me hope is that while it's sometimes hard to figure out what your future could be in this world, in the communities where we live, where you fit into it, that young people are saying that it's not good enough, that we need to change the whole community and we need to improve the way this country operates and the way our economy operates so that there's opportunity for everybody. And, we've set up a system, trickle-down economics, where it really does get to the point where, you wonder what the future is going to be for you, for any potential family that you might create, live with for the rest of your life. And part of what we have to do is make the world better, so that each of us can live a better life in it. And so it gives me a lot of hope and gratitude that so many young people are getting involved in the issues in our community. So we've got our youth commission that's making recommendations to me. We've got the health department's youth group. School district has got youth groups that are talking about issues that the grown-ups thought we had figured out, and we obviously haven't. So thank you for coming together. Thank you for guiding us, and thank you for making a better world. That's going to probably help with anxiety issues more than any other thing that we can do is to make this community better. So thanks.
Good evening, and welcome to Coping with Anxiety, Youth in 2020. My name is Drake Smith. I'm a senior at Meade High School and student member of the Anne Arundel County Board of Education. This event is a partnership between Anne Arundel County Public Schools, the Anne Arundel County Mental Health Agency, the Anne Arundel County Department of Health, and the Office of the County Executive. Tonight, you will hear from mental health experts from across the county who will discuss with students ways to be candid and open about mental health problems they might be facing during these difficult times. I will now turn it over to my co-moderator for tonight, Amaya Matarang of Northeast High School, who will give the why of this event. Amaya?
Thanks, Jake. Hello, everyone. I'm Amaya Matarang, a senior at Northeast High School and the chairperson of Let's Talk Justice, and I will be your other co-moderator for this event. We are here tonight to address one of the rising issues that come with the crises that have been so prevalent this year, mental health. With Suicide Awareness Month coming to a close in September, this event is especially fitting. However, even before the issues of today, mental health has always been a struggle. Here's some statistics to show why we are here. According to the World Health Organization, about a fourth of the world's population suffers from mental illness. That means upwards of 125,000 people in our county alone struggle with their mental health according to the 2010 census. Mental health conditions account for 16% of the global burden of disease and injury in people aged 10 to 19 years. Half of all mental health conditions start by age of 14, but most cases are undetected and untreated. Suicide is the third leading cause of death in 15 to 19-year-olds. Like the rest of the world, young people are experiencing difficult times. social unrest, COVID-19, and the start of a virtual year all pose new and sometimes debilitating challenges for us as youth. Today, we are here to talk about how to overcome some of these challenges and navigate our new environment. Welcome to Coping with Anxiety Youth in 2020. I'll now pass it back over to Drake, who will introduce our panelists and mental health specialists for tonight.
Thanks, Maya. Our first panelist is Ms. Jennifer Corbin. She's the director of the Anne Arundel County Crisis Response System, which is under the direction of the Anne Arundel County Mental Health Agency, where she provides direct oversight into the day-to-day operations of the crisis system. Much of her work is in collaborating with outside agencies to work with the crisis system, such as Anne Arundel County Police and Fire and the Health Department, Anne Arundel County Public Schools, local hospitals, and local health providers. She is a trained instructor in mental health first aid and has helped train all of Anne Arundel County Police become certified in the public safety model of MHFA. Ms. Corbin is also trained in critical incident stress management and has helped develop a peer support team for Anne Arundel County Police. Ms. Corbin has worked in the mental health field for 21 years and received her master's degree in social work from the University of Maryland School of Social Work. Mr. Darren R. Ford is the Family Resource Coordinator for Adolescent and Family Services at Anne Arundel County Department of Health. He earned his master's in marriage and family therapy at North Central University with a focus of general family therapy and received his bachelor's in the performing arts at the University of Maryland. Prior to becoming a clinical consultant, Mr. Ford dedicated over 20 years of his life serving families locally and internationally. After moving back to Maryland, he was appointed by the former Anne Arundel County executive to serve on the Mental Health Agency Board and other county boards with a focus on enriching at-risk families and improving the mental health condition of county residents. Mr. Ford has also served as the Strengthening Families Program Coordinator for the Anne Arundel County Department of Health, which addresses alcohol and drug reduction and the reunification of families across the county. Mr. Ford has been the recipient of the Service Above Self Award of South County Rotary Club in Anne Arundel County for the work of his nonprofit, Men of Courage International Incorporated. He has also received the Public Health Hero Award of the Anne Arundel County Department of Health for his service to community members. Mr. Ford is committed to using his faith, multicultural experiences, and mental health education to create a safe and welcoming place for all families in Annapolis, Anne Arundel County, and everywhere he goes. Ms. Catherine A. Gray is the clinical director of the Anne Arundel County Mental Health Agency, where she provides oversight and supervision of the crisis response system and the agency's clinical services team. As an integral member of the leadership management team, she is responsible for ensuring that clinical standards, funding, and regulatory compliance requirements are met in service delivery to clients. She's trained in strategic family therapy, therapeutic crisis intervention, critical incident stress management, trauma-informed care, and resilience. Ms. Gray has worked in the mental health field for over 20 years and has extensive experience in clinical social work and crisis intervention. Mrs. Gray received her master's degree in social work from the University of Maryland Baltimore School of Social Work in 1996. Mr. Ryan Vogelin. Mr. Ryan Vogelin completed his master's degree in school counseling from Johns Hopkins University in 2001. He has worked in public education in Maryland for the past 20 years as an elementary school counselor, a pupil personnel worker, a middle school assistant principal, and elementary school principal. In his current position as the Director of Student Services for Anne Arundel County Public Schools. In his position, he oversees school counselors, school psychologists, and school social workers and people personnel workers. We welcome all of our panelists for tonight.
Thank you, Jake. We'll now start with the introduction of our student moderators. Each student moderator will introduce themselves with their name, grade, school, and a couple of reasons of why they want to be here tonight. We'll start with Edward.
Good afternoon. My name is Edward Awe. I am a senior at Arundel High School, and a main reason why I want to be here today is because I really want to start the discussion of the mental health issues that have been affecting our students in our county.
Next is Beckett.
Hello, everyone. My name is Beckett Hummer. I'm a sophomore at Meade High School, And I wanted to be a part of this forum because I think it's a great resource and opportunity for others to have these sometimes difficult conversations. And I've struggled over this time period with some of these issues as well.
And then we'll have Gina.
Hi, my name is Jana Monroe. I'm a sophomore at Severna Pike High School, and I've really wanted to be here today because I've struggled with mental health for a long amount of time, and I really just want to break the stigma around mental health, especially in Anne Arundel County.
Thank you to all the student moderators and panelists who are here tonight. I will now introduce our opening speaker, Dr. Nilesh Kalyanaraman. Dr. Kalyanaraman is a fellow of the American College of Physicians and has been the Anne Arundel County Health Officer since September 2019. Under his leadership, some of the Department of Health's priority projects for the county and the city of Annapolis include health equity, gun violence prevention, and opioid misuse intervention. Dr. Kalyanaraman, an internist, has been in community health for more than 13 years, providing primary care and medication-assisted treatment. From 2012 to 2019, he was the Chief Health Officer at Healthcare for the Homeless, a community health center in Baltimore where he oversaw the integration of medical, behavioral health, dental, case management, and supportive housing services. From 2010 to 2011, he was an AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellow at the National Institute of Health. Dr. Kalyanaraman previously served as a board member of the Maryland Dental Action Coalition, and he was the research chair of the National Healthcare for the Homeless Council. Please welcome our opening speaker, Dr. Kalyanaraman.
Thank you, Amaya. It's good to be here today. I'm really glad that we're doing this today. I think it's really critical that we talk about mental health. And I want to frame a little bit about where we are because we're certainly in a moment. We're in a moment in 2020, which will go down as a special year, no doubt. But we're about 7 months into a global pandemic, the likes of which we haven't seen in over a century. And so a lot of the issues that we've talked about for a long time are kind of got pushed down for a little bit during the beginning of COVID because there just wasn't any oxygen in the room to talk about them. And we're seeing the effects of that, right? We're seeing what happens when people don't get care or don't have their usual social circles and networks to support them. There are economic struggles during the COVID pandemic. We're additionally seeing that there are some pretty stark inequities that are once again revealing themselves during COVID. One of the things we saw pretty quickly when COVID first came to Maryland was that within weeks we started seeing that Blacks and Hispanics were more likely to get COVID than we would expect. And I like to say that the virus isn't racist. It's tracking along lines in society that already existed there prior. And so it really highlighted some of the issues we're talking about: systemic racism, inequities in terms of resources, access to school. And that's why we started the COVID-19 Health Equity Initiative in April, just about a month after we first saw it in our state. And it's a way to really address the key drivers of those inequalities. And we've had conversations with community members, and that's really the key, is those conversations. And it's a two-way conversation. That's why I say conversation, both to understand, but also to partner with community members in figuring out what's going on and then implementing solutions to deal with that. And a big part of that has been looking at mental health in the context of what's happening in COVID. But one of the areas that we don't talk as much about is with our youth. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that COVID has a different effect on the youth in terms of just infections. We're finding that people younger than 20 are less likely to get infected and less likely to have severe disease. But it doesn't mean that the whole world hasn't also shifted around you like it has for everybody else. And that is a very real manifestation of that. It's super weird to be on the Brady Bunch Zoom screen, right? When all of you should really be in school right now and I should be in my office. That's just one way that it's rearranging. It's rearranging how we are operating as a society. And so it's really just great to be in this conversation, and I'm excited for the questions and the discussion that comes.
Thank you, Dr. Kalyan for those wonderful opening remarks. You really tried to make sense of this really crazy situation, with these Brady Bunch screens. In an effort to give equity of voice and address each question that has been submitted, for each question we have identified 2 panelists to initially respond, and then we will open the discussion to the other panelists. I'd like to remind viewers that there will be information scrolling at the bottom of the screen, so if you need assistance, please look there. And if you are in crisis or know someone who is in crisis, please contact the Anne Arundel County Warm Line at 410-768-5522. I'll now turn over to our first student facilitator, Jana.
Okay, so this is directed towards Ms. Gray and Dr. Kalyan. Many people believe that mental illness is all in one's head. However, I've heard that people have physical body aches like chest pains and muscle aches from mental illness. Can you please elaborate on how mental illness can impact one's physical health, or how it's more important than how it's more than a mental struggle? And this is from a senior at Northeast High School.
Sure. So this is actually a really important question, because a lot of the first symptoms you start to experience are actually physical symptoms. We sometimes forget that our heads are actually connected to the rest of our body, and our heads do communicate with the rest of our body. So when you look at things like depression, sometimes your first symptoms are going to be that extreme fatigue, the lethargy. You just don't have the energy to do anything. With anxiety, you're talking about things like your chest is racing, your heart is palpitating, you can have excessive sweating. So these are all things that are kind of first warning signs. This doesn't mean that, because you're anxious about a test or because you're feeling sad over a specific incident that it's a mental illness. But if this is something that persists over a period of time, that's a good warning sign for you to ask for help, whether it's through your student services, student counselors, whether it's through your pediatrician's office, talking to your parents about it. Getting yourself connected to treatment is really important. The earlier people enter into treatment, the better the outcomes. And one of the things that I think is important when we are looking at mental illness is you can recover from a mental illness. So we want to get treatment started very, very early.
Yeah, I think that's exactly correct. The mind-body connection is the key to this, which is that your mind affects your body and your body affects your mind. And one of the things that we sort of overlook is that physical symptoms, as Catherine said, can be the first signs, but they can also be long-term signs. And so particularly with depression, changes in sleep or changes in eating or feeling tired certainly can be signs of depression. And it's challenging, particularly in adolescence, because those may also be signs of growth and development. And so it's important to talk about those, whether it's with your family or friends or a health professional. If you're concerned about that, to be able to talk about that and to work through it and see maybe it does go away, but maybe it doesn't, and you do need further care.
Would any other panelists care to respond? Great. Thank you for both of those responses. I'll now turn it over to our next facilitator, Beckett.
Okay, so some specialists use science to explain why these times of isolation have such negative effects on students. Do you think that by learning about the science behind our current mental health, that it could help people to cope with their feelings as a way to understand it, or does it make students feel invalidated in their emotions? And this is from a sophomore at South River High School. Our first panelist is Mr. Vogling.
Again, I think that's an important question to dive into the first question. I do think it's important to understand the science behind why you feel a certain way. I think it actually validates your emotions. Sometimes when we're feeling anxious, we're feeling depressed, we don't understand why it's happening. So when we do understand the science behind it, we start to understand why our body reacts this way it does. And especially if we have some severe anxiety or some severe depression or some severe mental health going on, we want to make sure that we understand that biology. And then that allows us, it validates our emotions, but it also allows us to make sure that we're engaging in the appropriate coping mechanisms, whether it's behavioral coping or whether we need to work with our doctor for any kind of medical or medication that, to support the things that are going on in our body and our brain. So I definitely think it's important. And, when we think of mental health, sometimes we don't equate it to physical health issues, but when, let's say we have high blood pressure or diabetes, we would treat that by going to our doctor and talking to someone and figure out what's going on in our body. Mental health is much the same way. There's a biological component that, even though it's emotional, we can't ignore that. So I think it's important to understand that science.
Thank you. Next, Miss Dr. Kalyan Raman.
And building on that, that's what it means to speak up, to share about what's going on, and to combat stigma is to be able to understand what's happening, what we experience, or the symptoms of what's going on. And I agree 100% with what Ryan said, which is that with other conditions, we want to understand what's happening, what's underlying that as well. If there are more physical conditions like diabetes or heart disease. And in the same way, we want to understand why we feel the way we do and we experience the different symptoms that we do. And so it's really the same type of inquiry and process so that we can better care for people.
Would any other panelists like to respond? Amaya?
I'd like to extend that conversation. You both responded saying that it's important to learn the science behind mental health because it helps us better cope and break stigmas. Do you think that students should have more access to learning about mental health and learning about the science behind it in schools? Or do you think that's something that we should just have access to in our daily lives or like research on our own? Oh wait, anyone can respond to that.
I think it's a little bit of both. I think part of reducing stigma is to educate yourself, but also find other ways to educate other people. Even things like person-centered language. A person's mental illness doesn't define who they are. It's an experience that they have. It's not who they are. And so when you hear people say, oh, they're something, that's an opportunity for you to educate somebody else that, no, they're experiencing something, but that's not who they are. They're a pianist, a runner, or whatever. But the mental health component can be a small piece of their experience. So I think that helps with reducing the stigma. I think any opportunity we have to teach about mental health, Jen Corbin is one of our county's mental health first aid trainers. I think she's trained half the county by now. But those are ways that, they're one-day trainings, maybe two-day trainings, depending on how you break them up. But those are opportunities really to learn more about not just mental health, but what to do when someone a friend, a loved one is experiencing something and comes to you. What do you do? Jen, do you want to talk a little bit about mental health first aid?
Yeah, so I was gonna just chime in and say that it's actually really important to understand those signs and symptoms. And a few years ago, we actually went into several of the high schools and did mental health first aid youth to the students. Why? Because they wanted to know what they were looking for. They wanted to be able to help their friends, their peers, when they saw something. But so we did that with small groups with the hope that if they were at lunch or they were in the hallway and someone came to them concerned, they would have that ability to say, I can help you, we can go get someone to kind of talk this out. It was just giving them the tools to link them to the right people to make sure they get the help that they need. But understanding kind of what might be okay at the age you're at to be experiencing and what might be a little outside of that normal is really important. Because some of this stuff that happens is part of growth, part of building resiliency, and some of it is a warning sign for things to come. So understanding that, I agree, you need to be able to educate it a little bit on that. But just enough that you're not overly concerned, but enough that you have the knowledge to help someone or yourself if needed.
I would like to chime in here and say, knowledge, we've heard that term, knowledge is power. And I'm into Marvel Comics, my son is, and my daughter, and superhero powers. And I agree that as much as possible, we need to give this knowledge to the youth so that they can be like superheroes of this generation, educating their friends, reminding their friends of all the different resources that exist to really support their friends and help their friends to be healed. And even parents, they can be superhero parents by having this knowledge to really be able to pass this on to their youth or to promote it in their community, so that everyone has this knowledge on mental health. Because I like the whole idea of being a superhero, and we get to be, especially during this time, be a superhero by sharing what we know about the different practices of how to cope in a healthy way when it comes to anxiety. So yes, give the knowledge everywhere you can in the community. That's going to help each generation to succeed.
Great. Well, thank you, Maya, for that question. It really opened up the conversation. I just want to remind all the other student facilitators that if you do have a question that arises after a panelist responds, just feel free to ask it. We want this to be a very fluid and dynamic conversation. I just want to add on to Mr. Ford's comments about power. I've heard that applied knowledge is power, right? Superman isn't great because he has these powers. He's great because he uses them. So make sure we really use these resources and take away the knowledge and actually apply it in our communities. So I want to thank you for that, Mr. Ford. We can all really be Superman or Black Panther. So I'll turn over to our next student facilitator, Eddie.
Hello. This is a question directed towards Mr. Ford and Mrs. Corbin. How do certain stereotypes of different races, cultures, and genders needing more or less mental health than others factor into people's willingness to help? How do we go about combating this stigma in our communities? Mr. Ford?
That's a great question. I think when you think about the history of different ethnic groups within America, their experiences have caused them to maybe frown upon going out and getting the help that they might need when it comes to mental health issues. That may be because of their religious upbringing, where they are told that, you don't go outside of the church, for example, or a spiritual place of worship to get help with your mental health issues. Or you may be from a culture like maybe African Americans, where we've heard of history of African Americans being tortured in certain settings and things like that. So it can be very hard and difficult to really kind of overcome those thoughts or that past history and really go and get that help and recognize that, wait, no, these resources can actually help me as well, regardless of my religion, regardless of my ethnic group, regardless of my gender. I think on the gender part, we are told in society as men that we're supposed to have it figured out, that we're not supposed to, show emotions and feelings and have those types of things. And the reality is that everyone struggles with anxiety, no matter what gender you are, no matter what race you are, no matter what religion you believe in. So I think we have to address those kind of myths and lies that are out there. And how we do that, I think the way we do that is we hear people from those genders that don't necessarily in the past have gone after getting that help, and hearing their story and saying, hey, I went to go get help and it changed my life. It helped me. And in a community, to hear someone else's story that that's gone after getting that help is so crucial to promoting that use of that resource, right? And I think the other thing that comes to mind is just education. Really educating all the ethnic groups, saying that this is a human issue. It's not a race issue, a gender issue, a culture issue. It's a human issue, and we all fall into that category. So those are things that definitely come to my mind when it comes to just addressing some of these stereotypes.
So, yeah, I want to approach it in a little different fashion of kind of what I'm seeing from the crisis response system and the calls that we do. What I'm seeing now and today is generational issues as well. Cultural, racial, gender within the household. You know, what parents might be feeling is the proper way to deal with mental health is very different from what the youth might be wanting to do. And so we a lot of times get into actually a struggle within the household of how to help both individuals, the parent and the child, work together to get that help. Because what the youth might be saying is helpful, the parents might say that's not what we want. And so a lot of times we have to come up with ways to meet both needs to make sure that the linkage occurs for that youth that might be struggling. Another piece that we find is making sure that in a lot of cases that it's kept in the household and that maybe not seeking those outside resources is something that we see a lot on calls for service. So what we try to do at Crisis Response is start to meet where the individual is. And if that is, you know, the family wants it dealt with in the home, we start there and then try to show those options that can be brought in or used outside of the home. One of the things I want to say to students out there is you have a ton of resources at school that you can go to. And what you're comfortable with is where you should seek those resources. And I say that because I did a big training with all the school nurses. And it was interesting to hear in different parts of the county how mental health is dealt with in their school. How some students will go to their guidance counselor, not to the school nurse, and how other people may go to the school nurse and would never enter the guidance counselor's office to do that. So it's identifying what's going on that's comfortable for you to reach out to someone, and letting people know that there are tons of resources in your school, whether it's your resource officer, your SRO, your guidance counselor, your nurse, your principal, whoever it is that you're comfortable with. You can start the conversation there. If you're not comfortable yet addressing it outside of that. But I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about how we're really starting to see that generational piece when we go out on calls, when we're dealing with culture and race.
I'm sorry. No, I just wanted to say that I love both of your responses. And actually, I have another question just to further this conversation. Combining different aspects of both of your answers. Like Mr. Ford, you were talking about education and how we need to really educate the students and give them as many resources as possible. And Mrs. Corbin talking about, you know, we work from the home. You know, we need to find this happy medium between, you know, traditional views of mental health and the students. So my question is, you know, combining education and working from the home, how do we educate or find a way to educate parents? You know, how do we give them, you know, resources to tell them that, hey, you know, it's not, you know, like you don't have to do it like this. You know, scientists like recommend that you do it like this. So how do we, you know, start that conversation?
Well, I think it's definitely partnership. You know, partnering with the school system so that when the school system sends information on this topic to the students, it's also going to the parents as well. I also think that social media is a huge platform that both parents and students are on. So getting those messages out on both for both the parents as well as the students out on those platforms where they're hearing the same message of the different ways of combating mental health issues. I think also within each community, if there's like example, like I mentioned before, churches or spiritual places of worship or any kind of community center where all of those places are getting that same information so that it hits the parents and the youth in all these different locations. And that way, conversations are being held about how are we going to use those tools within our home, because it may be different per home depending on what's going on, but at least the information is getting out in all these different channels and these different ways.
I think it changes when kids bring these conversations home to their parents. That's when the changes occur. So having these conversations right now are so important, and then taking this information that you learned today and then going back and talking to your parents about it, that breaks down barriers. And the more conversations that we have about mental health, the more that we break down that stigma. And then over time, it becomes something that's normal to talk about. And that's why I just think it's so impressive to see the children, the youth coming out and having these conversations. So I think that's just a huge step in terms of breaking down that stigma.
I think an important point, though, and it's a great question, is what do parents do once that conversation happens? We need to make sure we're giving parents the tools they need to respond when their youth comes home and says, I need help, or this is what's going on, or this is how I feel. Because we don't want you to go to them and then not have the tools to be able to help you. So I think that's a big piece. And another piece that I think we have to remember is, while youth are great at social media and getting on, we need to remember not all parents are going to be. So making sure that knowledge is coming out, maybe in good old fashioned paper style, right? In the mail, by email, not just on Facebook, Twitter, those kinds of things, because we need to make sure we're hitting everybody with the same information. I agree with what Mr. Ford's saying, but we have to do it in many different ways. I know it sounds like a lot, but for your parents to understand, sometimes that's what has to happen. But we need to make sure they are able to respond to help you, to give them the tools to guide you guys in the right direction.
Well, thank you all for your responses. And I think the topic of intergenerations really segues perfectly into the next question, which I will ask right now. Is intergenerational trauma in minorities taken seriously in mental health? And the student wants to know the how and the why. This is from a sophomore at Severna Park High School. And the first panelist that we would like to respond is Mrs. Gray.
Sure. So intergenerational trauma is trauma that began years prior to the current generation. And it impacts in different ways for the individual, family, and as well as the community, how they cope with it and how they heal from it. Intergenerational trauma can have some negative impacts on families. I think probably over the last 10 years, there's definitely been a better understanding of trauma and trauma treatment. What is trauma? What are the effects of trauma? And what are appropriate trauma responses? This year, probably maybe it was right after COVID hit. There was a group of about 20 of us in Anne Arundel County that were trained to be trainers for trauma-informed care, not just for clinicians, but for criminal justice judges, lawyers, detention centers, ensuring that not just mental health clinicians are understanding trauma, which does include intergenerational trauma, that our entire system, whether it's our school system, our criminal justice system, our behavioral health system, all understands the impact if we don't address this. So that's one of the things we really have done better with, but we have a lot more work to go.
Thank you, Mr. Ford.
Yes, I agree. We have begun to really address this, but we have a long way to go. And we see that in the responses that we're getting in the general public when it comes to racial injustice, and how African Americans and maybe Latinas have also experienced that discrimination when it comes to just health equity. And it's been one of the ways that we've begun to address that, specifically here in Anne Arundel County. We've started a new office focused on that, called the Health Equity and Racial Justice Office, and really striving to support minorities and looking from that perspective of intergenerational trauma, recognizing that many generations of trauma, many people have experienced trauma over time, and we're going to have to take a different approach of how we present these resources, and we can't just kind of call people from our offices, but we're actually now going into the communities and actually talking with people and having focus groups and really learning about what people have gone through so we can do a better job at meeting their needs on a mental health level. So we have a long way to go, but we're getting there, and we're doing our best to really make sure we're being coming up to speed to really meeting the felt needs of those families who've experienced trauma over a lot of generations.
I think Darren mentioned something so important, this health equity, and how that health equity actually impacts both our physical health and our mental health, including our life expectancy. These social determinants of health, your healthcare system, your economic stability, your neighborhood, your education, your access to food, your community, your support system. These are all things that impact who we become. These are things that impact how we interact with the rest of society. And we really need to ensure that everybody has access to those things, and especially behavioral health services. Even things like transportation. You wouldn't think in this day and age, transportation would be an issue to get somebody to a mental health appointment. Do they have access to health insurance? Okay, so if they don't, then what? There's all these barriers that we need to make sure people don't experience, and if they do, then they are easily resolved. And that's something that I think we are still working diligently to ensure that this doesn't continue to happen.
And I also want to just, again, bring attention to, I don't remember if I said this specifically, but the how and the why we're addressing this. Why are we addressing this, and how? I talked about a little bit how, but why? I think really the why is because of the youth. I really believe that this is a new generation where we hear you loud and clear. Your voice is loud and clear. And you have a way of saying things where we need to act. And I think that's powerful, and that's important, especially when it comes to mental health, because this is something that is intergenerational trauma. And if we don't deal with it per generation, it will continue, right? So you all are a part of the why, and I commend you all for being here and for doing the work that you're doing. So thank you.
I'm gonna chime in for a second here as well, and just highlight a couple of things. One is there's a lot of work that's been done around trauma, and particularly if you've heard of the adverse childhood experiences, a way to understand the effects of trauma in children and youth. And a lot of the things that drive those traumatic experiences in childhood are things that are done by parents or by community, and that's because of something happened to them as well, and it spans generations, it spans decades, it spans the community. And so it's really, really important to understand not just a person, but also the community and the setting in which they're in. And that requires understanding what's happened, including that intergenerational trauma piece. The other part is just to build on what Darren was saying. We have focused on health equity and racial justice at the health department. And we also declared racism as a public health issue, and we did that last November. We were the third county in the country to do that. And the reason is that the data shows it. The data shows that these disparities have been going on for a very long time. And those health disparities and outcomes they stack up. Then once again, they stack up over generations and decades. And those decisions and those actions that took place well before any of us were born still ring through in our lives. And so to be able to address them, we have to be able to identify them and then to work on them. And so this is of a piece with that.
I want to thank you all for responding to the question. Very thoughtful. Our next facilitator is Beckett.
Okay, so a junior from Annapolis High School writes, I have no issues talking to strangers, no issues talking to my closest friends, but blur that line. Anywhere where I want to impress someone and want someone to become one of my closest friends, to be loved by them, I start to tremble, get heart palpitations, my palms sweat heavily, maybe my everything. I get these pangs like I get these pangs that feel like something is exploding in my little cavity thing and a bunch of other stuff. I don't know how to be myself around acquaintances, and with virtual school, I'm really struggling. How do I get comfortable? I feel like there's always someone who frowns down on me at my twitches too. So first is Mr. Vogelin.
All right, thank you, Becky. My first thought in this with this question is that I would recommend that the student reach out to their school counselor. Just so all of you know, your school counselors are huge supports for students in the schools, and everyone in the school system has access to a school counselor. So in this case, it sounds like there's some anxiety, some nerves, and working with your school counselor to develop some coping strategies on how to deal with those feelings, those emotions when they come up, and developing a plan on how to address those situations when they come, so you will feel more comfortable when you're in these situations. So, that to me is the first step. And your counselors can be helpful in terms of helping develop that plan, coming up with some of these coping strategies, and then also if it's something more serious where it might require some outside therapy and some more intensive therapy, they can also help connect you with a therapist outside of the school system to get some more intensive mental health support. I also think just making sure that you're connected, as the student mentioned, their family and friends, they feel comfortable talking to their family and friends and making sure they have a support group that helps them get through some of these feelings and emotions and helps them connect with their school counselor and any other mental health support that they might need. That would be my recommendation in dealing with some of these feelings.
Thank you. Next is Miss Gray.
So when we're around people we know, we're comfortable with, it really does put us at ease. Right now, almost everyone is experiencing situations that they have not experienced before. They're not terribly comfortable for any of us. And it does sort of give you that anxiety-provoking feeling. One of the things you may notice is you start having rapid breath or shallow breath. So you can even just start with focusing on your breathing, slowing your breathing down. It's also important to acknowledge, yes, this is actually how I'm feeling right now. Give it a name. You can also change your thoughts. We tend to go to sort of the worst case scenario very quickly. And you can ask yourself questions. Okay, so how likely is this to happen? What will happen if this does happen? And how would I handle it? And can I handle it? You mentioned if someone frowns down on you, even just shifting that thought pattern to maybe they're having a bad day. Maybe they're not understanding what's going on in the classroom. Maybe it doesn't have anything to do with me, but there may be other reasons for that. And just being able to shift that thought to reframing the thought to something other than it's about me or it's directed at me. And then the last thing is just sort of visualize yourself being completely calm. You could create a mental picture maybe of you being around your friends when you are comfortable, and that can help calm you as well. But as Ryan said, if it's something that goes on for a longer period of time and you're not really acclimating to our kind of new normal as well as you would like, definitely reach out for help.
I would just like to hop on to this and share some of my own personal experiences to do with this. Sorry. So when it talks about virtual school, so I personally I try to keep my camera on as much as possible because I feel for these teachers because it's really hard teaching to just blank circles. They want to teach to faces, so I try to keep my cameras on as much as possible. But it is a fairly new thing for most of us, and I have been doing these calls all summer, but it's still not normal to say. So I found my own personal ways that I can deal with it when I get stressed out or I'm getting anxious or feel like I can't concentrate, because I don't really struggle with the actual school part, but being in the new setting or being with these new people. So I found like personal strategies that work for me. And some of that includes like right now, like I'll have something in my hands to keep me busy so I won't, like I can stay concentrated, or um, other things like that. So I've like always have a separate way to do it, but I definitely think that a lot of students are struggling with that, and it's not all completely normal, but it shouldn't be like shamed upon to feel these anxious feelings or just do these anything like that, because this is something new for all of us, and it's not something that we should try to get into our completely new normal, but it's going to be our normal for a little while.
So thank you for sharing, Becky. That was really powerful. Would anybody else like to respond? Well, the next question is with Eddie.
Just to continue this conversation about coping mechanisms and things we could do to really adjust to this new online world. This comes from a junior from South River High School. What are some coping mechanisms that can effectively reduce stress and anxiety? The panelists are Mr. Ford and Mr. Vogel.
Yeah, I think Catherine already kind of touched on a lot of great coping mechanisms that we can use. I think kind of piggying back on the story that was given, or the insert that was read to us earlier from the high school student, I think it's important that students take the time out to, one of the things I love to do, and one of the things that can be helpful, is journaling about like your successes and writing about the things that you've overcome and the victories that you've had in your life, and being able to recognize that that's who you are. You are victorious, you are overcomer, and really having those thoughts going in your head on a regular basis, on a daily basis if that's needed, so that you can really have that self-worth, so that when you're facing a situation that's challenging, you can piggyback on those victories that you've had, those past ways that you've overcome certain challenges that you've had in your life, and you may need, as Ryan said before, you may need a counselor or a therapist or a parent to remind you of those victories that you've had before, but I think that's important. I also think just being able to take time to breathe. Another coping mechanism is going outside and getting fresh air, whether it's going for a walk, I'm a runner, so I love doing my early morning runs. And that just helps me sometimes, seeing the sun rise as I'm running. And it just helps me to clear my thoughts and calm my heart and really help me to prepare myself for the day. I also think, Ryan mentioned this before too, taking time to, if you know that something's going to be stressing for you or stress inducing, beforehand, take some time to think through what are some things you can do that's going to ease that experience a little bit more. So you're like, instead of, you're not in the football game, but you're doing practice. So you're like, okay, I know I'm going to get this hit. So how can I move that another way, or juke that way, or whatever, so that you can be prepared, because the hit is coming, right? So again, how do you take time to prepare for that day so you can experience more peace instead of that anxiety? Preparing can really lower those anxiety experiences. And I think the other thing is seeing what you can give to others. Sometimes we can be going into a situation where we can be concerned about what other people are going to think about us, or will I be able to succeed, and kind of thinking through just kind of the stresses of, will I make it through this time, versus what can I give? How would I go into a class? How can I love what Beckett said. The teachers are there and they don't, what about them? And that screen speaking to, I can go and be a joy to a teacher. I can be a joy to another student. And all of a sudden, it changes the way you feel about yourself. It changes the way you feel about the situation, because now you're a positive influence in that situation, because you're thinking about what you can give versus what you're not going to get. So those are some things that come to my mind, along with what Catherine already had said.
And I'll just add to that those are some great examples of some coping strategies. And I think, with the new situation we're in with virtual learning and not being able to see people as much, I really think it's adapting to our change and adapting to what's going on and being able to figure out what works for us. Beckett just mentioned, she just laid out a perfect example of how virtual learning is a different experience, but she's now adapted and figured out some strategies that are helping her now live this experience. So I think you have to figure out those coping mechanisms and strategies that work for you. And whether it's exercising, whether it's journaling, or whether it's gratitude, writing, kindness, meditation, mindfulness, these are all things that are helpful when it comes to coping with stress, but you have to figure out what works for you. And I did want to put a plug in for the high school student wellness block. That block was developed with the intention of allowing students to have a voice in what their wellness looks like, especially in this time of virtual learning and this time of not being able to see their friends as much. So, in that block, discussions are being had around what wellness looks like and what are strategies you can use in terms of dealing with some of this anxiety and stress that is going on in your lives right now. But I really think it's finding what works for you and then being able to adapt. And if you can't adapt, and you're struggling with that, reach out to those people who can help you, because there's nothing wrong with reaching out for help. We all need to do it. So,
I'll say one last thing about this as well. I think the other thing I had thought about is control. Sometimes we can focus on things that we can't control. Like, we can't control the pandemic, right? We can't control the fact that we're in a virtual school now. We can't control those things, right? But really focusing on what you can control. How you could be, a force, a positive force, or whatever that is that you can be, like, even as Ryan said, figuring out what works for you and how that's something you can control, figuring out what works for you. And that tends to also reduce anxiety levels because you're in a space that is safe because that space, you're familiar with that space, so.
Would anyone else like to respond? Are there any further questions?
Yeah, I'll just comment this one quick thing. It's difficult. There's different ways like anxiety will hit you or stress will hit you. Like when you're nervous about something's going to happen in the future, or when you're in the moment and something hits you, But one of my teachers, she's really, really great with like dealing with all the different students' needs. So in the middle of class, she'll give us like a 5-minute break, and she'll always have like a recommendation of what you can do during that time, or you can just take that time to like get up and walk around. But one of them that I found myself doing like very often during class is if I'm feeling like I just need a break, but I still have to pay attention to class, obviously, I'll turn my camera off and you go and you touch all 4 corners of your room or wherever you're at. And while you're doing that, you like focus on like being in the moment and not like worrying about things that you can't control or things that you're getting anxious or nervous about. And during that time, like that's really helped me because it's a time to zone out of school for a second, but still be present and to really like focus on something and focus on my breathing or other things like that. And I also have like on my desk, this is really funny, I use like my brother's old controllers or like thinking putty or silly putty. So like during class, like I can just focus on that instead of something else. And really just finding things that work for you, because the same thing's not going to work for everybody. But like even journaling or taking a walk every day or something like that can really help. And you won't even think it will until you try it. So.
Thanks, Beckett. I don't have a controller, but I have a fidget spinner. I like to play with that. But I really appreciate what everybody's been saying about, find what really works for you. I found a lot of students, they tell us to do these breathing exercises and they say, well, I'm breathing, nothing's happening. They say, close your eyes and meditate. Well, now I can't see what's happening, so I really just hope that students really, try these ways. It never hurts to try. You might find something that you would have never thought about that would really help you. Maybe something like yoga. So with that, we'll turn it over.
Can I add one thing?
Of course. It
takes an average of 66 times to try something before it becomes comfortable. So a lot of times we'll only try something 3-4 times and it never feels comfortable because it actually takes our brain that long to develop some of those neural pathways it's neuroplasticity, it's the brain's ability to adapt and change. But just keep that in mind when we're asking people to try something new. An average is 66 times. Unless you're doing it 66 times in a day, you're going to need to try it more than one day.
Wow, well, thank you for that, Ms. Gray. I did not know that. And the next question comes from Amaya.
Thank you, Jake. And thank you all for sharing everything that you've shared so far on how you cope and just in general. This is a really good conversation so far, and I want to keep it going. A senior from Arundel says, compared to other generations, the topic of mental health has been much more openly discussed in my generation. However, I feel as if it's almost to a fault. Usually, alarming rhetoric such as KMS and I want to die have been normalized to the point where if someone were to genuinely mean it, it wouldn't be taken seriously until it's too late. How do you think students can become more aware of these red flags so as to increase suicide prevention? Our first panelist is Ms. Corbin.
Oh, and Amaya, real quick, before Ms. Corbin goes, could you just explain to the people watching and to some of the panelists what KMS means?
Oh, yeah, sorry. KMS means kill myself. Or KYS would be like kill yourself.
So it's a great question. And I have a lot of concerns too, actually, about being numb or not being attuned to what sometimes is said around you because the slang or words are used so often. But that kind of takes us back to what we said earlier in this conversation when we talked about like mental health first aid and signs and symptoms. It's not just what people say that we don't need to just listen. We need to look, we need to feel, we need to observe, what's going on around that individual who says something. And a lot of times I tell this especially when I'm talking to schools is, it takes more than asking someone if they're okay once, because the first time you ask someone if they're okay, they're going to say yes. So when we hear that statement, first asking, are you okay? Is there anything you need? But you have to remember to go back and ask again. And I'm going to give you kind of something like Catherine just gave. You've got to ask someone at least 3 times or more before they're going to open up and say they're not okay. For a lot of individuals. Why? That 3rd or 4th time when someone comes back, you might go to class, come back out of class, see that person and go, I was thinking about what you said. I just really want to make sure you're okay today. That 2nd, 3rd, 4th time, someone that wasn't being truthful will go, that person must really be my friend. They keep asking me if I'm okay. They keep checking in. It's validating that feeling to them and saying, I really care about you. Maybe I can open up with these personal feelings I'm having. I think that's definitely one way. Another thing that I kind of want to share about in today's kind of world we're living in is that we are just becoming numb to a lot of things around us. And this is not just talking about mental health in general. We're talking about racial tensions. We're talking about mental health. We're talking about substance use, families that are hurting because of COVID. So when we look at someone making a statement, and it might not be necessarily that I want to hurt myself, it could just be today really sucks. And does someone go around and ask if they're okay? A lot of people talk about they will post something to see how many people respond to their post, because that's going to say if someone really cares or not. And so we need to look at ways to reach out to individuals and make sure they know that we care. And one of the biggest concerns I have in this day and age is we get a lot of calls at crisis response for check well-beings because someone has posted something on their social media page. And to me, when people call, they'll be like, oh, I don't want to lose them as a friend. And I'm like, they're going to thank you later for us showing up and asking if they're okay. So I think it's really important that peers understand that if someone is hurting, that you reach out and get them help. And that in the long run, you really are a true friend because you're reaching out and getting them help.
Thank you. Next is Mr. Ford.
Yeah, something that comes to my mind is, we mentioned it or touched on it before as a coping mechanism is preparation. being prepared. And one of the things that comes to my mind is role playing. And in therapy, that's a really powerful tool for families when you can have a scenario and let them play it out and just kind of figure out what would they do in that situation and kind of learn from that. And from that role playing, they come up with plans on how to approach a situation. I think students can do the same with their closest friends. Like say, hey, if we're ever in this situation where I'm showing these signs of suicide or harm, what are we going to do for one another? Let's come up with a game plan based upon the education that we've been given. And we're going to, let's agree that we're going to contact a counselor. Let's agree we're going to talk to a parent. Let's agree that we're going to do these things. And as students, you can really, with your closest friends, have that plan so that you are prepared to be there for one another in this way. I think also, individually as students, there's so much to put into our heads today from social media and the television and so on and so forth. And that goes to show you that, if we can choose to go on certain mediums and get negative information that will make us feel negative, then we can also choose that ability to go somewhere on a platform and choose to look at things that are going to educate us on how to have the capacity to be there for our friends, how to have the capacity to be compassionate, because Ms. Corbin was discussing about, checking in with that friend 1, 2, 3 times. Well, if you don't have the capacity, or if you've not allowed yourself to build the capacity to be compassionate, it's going to be very difficult to do that. And that doesn't just come automatically. It doesn't happen organically. You become a more compassionate person organically. No, you've got to work on that. And so I think that preparation, that conversation, role play at home, role play with your best friends of like, this is what we're going to do if we begin to see these signs in one another. And all of a sudden, you're an example for not just you and your close friends, but other students are going to watch your example and want to do the same thing. So those are some things that definitely come to mind.
I'd like to add to that. I know the topics kind of overlap because we talked about social media and stuff like that. But I think in the media in general, this is kind of similar. There's a lot of romanticization. I don't want to say it like that, but there is, of mental illness and like false information. For example, like in a movie, there will be like the main female lead she'll have like a panic attack, and then her crush will come in and like save her and make her feel comfortable and stuff like that. And people can get the wrong idea from that and either self-diagnose or it's just false information in general. Do you feel like that's a problem in mental health and stigmas today?
Yes. So there's actually a study done, I think it was in 2018, where the FBI looked at more media outlets on their portrayal of people who had engaged in more mass shootings, and the first response is they're all mentally ill. And it doesn't take into account some of the other factors. And it portrays people with mental illness in a very negative light that just isn't always the case. And I think we need to be very conscious of that the way media portrays people, whether it's on social media, whether it's in the news, whether it's on TV, that's a platform that a lot of people watch. And it would be really nice if media outlets were more responsible in how they portray that. And we are not there yet, but we are going to get there one day, where it's a more honest depiction of what mental illness is.
Well, thank you for that. And I just want to say, I was watching the nightly news yesterday, and they did a story about a high-profile person, having suicide-like tendencies. And after they had that story, they showed the national suicide hotline. So, we're making these steps slowly but surely. I really think that this is a perfect time to just put another plug in for the warm line here in Anne Arundel County. So if you are in crisis or someone you know is in crisis, please contact the Anne Arundel County warm line at 410-768-5522.
Drake, can I add something to that real quick?
Of course.
I don't think people know this, and I love it when I go to speak at the schools. To ask kids to take out their student ID and look on the back. There are numbers on the back that you can call. There are numbers that both to the warm line, to the suicide prevention. There's numbers that are on the back of school IDs. There you go. That's it. Yep. That are there for you for help. And I don't think we get that out enough. I know last year we tried putting a letter out and making sure that students knew that it was on the back of their ID. Because when you are stressed or you're in need of help, a lot of times you don't know where to reach to and you don't know who to call. And so we try to, if we could kind of keep putting that out, that might be a way to help students know that there are numbers they can call.
So I guess with that, my immediate question is just, what would you like to see, right, Ms. Corbin? What do you think the school system can do better to push that out there?
That's a good question. We've really tried to enhance that by not only letting the students know that, but also sending things through alerts and emails to parents to let them know the resources are out there and how they can access them. But maybe every once in a while, I know you guys do school announcements and TV things, maybe putting that plug out there about mental health. If it was out on a more regular basis, again, we'd be getting around to normalcy, right? This is something that we can talk about openly. A good friend of mine who used to speak with me at the schools years ago said, I can't wait for the day that someone comes into school saying, what a great day it is. I just met with my therapist and I'm ready to start the day. That's when we know we've made it. That's when we know that it's okay to express your feelings and to say that you're seeing someone. And I think that making it more normal in school by giving the access to resources more often and coming from you guys, coming from the students themselves makes it so much more powerful because it's accepted. If I stand up and say it, it's not as powerful as when it comes from a student.
Great. Well, thank you.
I have to agree with that too. And, we get resources out from a central office, district-wide. Dr. Lotto and Ms. Michler sent out a letter along with Dr. Kalyana of resources to parents, which is awesome. But I do think that next level is that student piece and tailoring it to your specific school, whether like Ms. Corbin said, through announcements or just grassroots through students talking. I think that's a great next step.
Great. Well, thank you both. And I'll make sure that, with my position, I'll try to add it to the schools. And I was going to say, someone needs to write the school board. Oh, wait, Great. And we have 2 more questions, and the next person to ask it will be Jana.
Okay, so this is directed towards Mr. Vogelin and Ms. Gray. So a sophomore from North County High School said, how would the panel feel about having a mandatory mental health check-ins for all students in schools once a year or semester, just for students to have a chance to talk one-on-one with mental health professionals about their life? If it is mandatory and everyone has to go, we can work to break the stigma around mental health and emphasize that opening up and showing emotions is not a sign of weakness for boys and girls.
So I love the idea of trying to break the stigma and having conversations about it. I think sometimes when we make something mandatory, you're not necessarily going to get the result that you want. So my thought is, our counselors need to make sure that they're connecting with students on their caseloads in ways that are natural, and of course in ways that kids come to them. But there are some kids that aren't going to come to them. So how can they connect with those kids? Whether it's in classroom lessons, whether it's small groups, whether it's reaching out to parents, and then checking in on those kids to see how they're doing mental health wise and school wise. And I also think it's teaching, educating teachers on how to ask kids how they're feeling, and then them knowing when to refer a kid to the student services office if there's a bigger issue. And also what Ms. Corbin had said earlier, kids asking the right questions to each other and then asking it over and over again, because it's not just one time we ask, we have to ask over and keep understanding how we're doing mental health wise. That to me would be the way that we break that stigma and we understand how we're doing with our mental health. and we're able to connect in a more natural way, because talking about mental health in a way that makes it mandatory, kids aren't necessarily going to open up, but if they feel comfortable, they have those relationships, that's when they're going to be more likely.
Yeah, I agree with Ryan. It is important to have check-ins. There's a lot of pediatric practices now that are doing depression screenings at every visit. But I think it's also important to recognize that one person is not going to connect with every single student, and we need to ensure that the staff at the schools, the staff in doctors' offices are trained and accessible to students, that they understand, when somebody's a little bit off. I feel like, it's been a while since I was in high school, but, a lot of us had sort of that one teacher that just, you felt super comfortable with. We could always go to her and just sort of vent. She knew when you were venting. She also knew when something's not quite right. And she would explore that with you. And that, for us, it wasn't our school counselor. It happened to be our gym teacher. But, making sure that students are comfortable with the person that they're going to, because that's the person you're really going to open up to. So we just need to make sure that kind of everyone is accessible to students.
Let me pitch in by saying that I think that the kind of efforts that really help are by distributing this across a variety of touch points. So, yeah, pediatricians, guidance counselors, school nurse, but also teachers and teachers and other adults and other staff, right? It's not really about having that one moment where you do it. It's having that ability to do it anywhere that you need to, and us checking in on each other and making sure that students are doing well. And so I think that that's much more in terms of a public health approach. We really want to push that out there, that we can all take a few moments to check in on each other, see how we're doing. And we all have people we trust more than others, right? Like, that's just people. But if all of the adults have tools to at least ask those few questions and then direct you to the right place, that's really when that's when screening is really much more effective, is when you don't have to seek it out, but when it actually finds you.
I like to piggyback on the doctor's comment. The public health aspect of this, all of you youth and all of us are in communities. And so there are places we would go that maybe someone else in this group wouldn't go. And that's a common place, whether it's a local community center or gym, maybe with COVID, maybe not as much, but all these different places we would go that we are connected to, getting that information to those places, this is helping them to be educated on how do I become a person who's available if someone from the public had an issue or were showing these signs. So I think really being able to, wherever we might be as a student, whatever library we go to or community, building that we attend, that we're taking that information into those places. And that way we're creating these places for people to receive that help that they might need when it comes to mental health issues.
Well, thank you. Would anyone else like to respond?
I have.
Jana?
Okay. So another thing with these mental health check-ins, we also have to have more diversity within the people that we talk to for these mental health check-ins. I go to a predominantly white high school, and there's not a lot of African American or just Black counselors or just administrators in general that I can talk to about stuff. Like, I'm currently in the process of changing my pediatrician because I don't really like the way how she kind of talks to me and how, like, her bedside manner. But we need to have more diversity within the people that we talk to, because not everyone is going to understand our situations. And back to the intergenerational trauma, not everyone is going to understand what we're going through and what we're talking about. And so we just need more diversity so we can get our thoughts across and our feelings across, and we could spread this to other places and just break the stigma.
I have a quick question. So this is for anyone. So we're saying that a lot of the time, like teachers are the best, or people in this school are the best like resource because they're the ones who can check in on you as well as your peers. How has that changed this year with us not being in the school buildings? Because I know that the best way for teachers to like notice and observe these things is by seeing you every day and seeing your mannerisms and seeing if your emotions have changed or the way you present yourself has changed. So how has that changed this year, especially with a lot of kids not even turning on their cameras, or teachers don't even know what half their students look like when they like face to face. So how has that changed this year, and what are some other solutions that students could go to, or different things like that?
I'll take the first question. You bring up an excellent point and something that we've had many conversations within my team in the school system. I've talked to Ms. Corbin and Ms. Gray about this issue, but when we're not in school buildings, it is so much harder to have our finger on the pulse of what's going on with kids emotionally. And we saw that especially in the spring, and we're trying to address it, even better in the fall. But when you can't go to a teacher after class, or they can't see your emotions or your face as clearly, they can't call that counselor to come down and see you, or ask you to go see the counselor, or if a friend sees you and you're upset, and they don't know what to do, they can't go to that counselor to say, I think Beckett needs to talk to someone. So it's just we've been training our student services staff, our counselors, social workers, to just be very, very aware of what you're seeing with kids, and to support those teachers to help them understand what they may be seeing with kids that may be those red flags where we need to reach out. And our counselors have Google Classrooms where kids can connect. They're providing this individual counseling through telehealth that they can meet with kids and provide that support. Reaching out to parents, we're providing that extra support with extra outside therapy if kids need that, and then connecting to the crisis response if it's they're in a crisis situation. But it is definitely, I think, the biggest issue we're facing right now when it comes to everyone being in a different location and not being together in a building and not having that clear understanding of what's going on with kids. So I can speak from the school perspective, but I'd be interested in hearing whatever other people say from the outside school perspective.
I think for me, I think you said it perfectly in the sense of the school side, but for me on the outside, if we're not seeing people, we really don't know how they are. And so for me, one of the things that I think I encourage teachers and other students on the Zoom to do is to get people to turn their cameras on, make it fun. I've heard that I talked actually to a student the other day who said, my teacher's so cool. You know what it was? Whoever stayed the longest on the picture and participated, they would mail us something, and it was like played, but it's just a game. We got to keep people intrigued, but we got to get their faces on the screen. I agree 100% with you that the only way right now that we can check in is the way we're doing it, which is Zoom, is getting people on the screen. So really trying as a peer even to encourage your peers to turn their camera on, to check in, or if not, to check on them when the class goes away. Hey, your camera wasn't on today. Are you okay? We can do those kind of checkpoints. Look, I know we spend a lot of time saying go to adults, but you will hear me every day saying the most important relationship is peer-to-peer. It is you guys supporting each other. And I always say the best thing that we can do is have you check in on your friends. And one of those is if you see them not on the camera, check in. Ask why they're not on the camera. Ask if everything's okay. And just remember, do it more than once.
Me in my position as the family resource coordinator, as I hear about opportunities for children, for the adolescent family services, the clients there, or just for the community, I'm tied into just the list of faith-based leaders or the list of nonprofit leaders that do work in the community for children and for families. Soon as I get a flyer of some sort about mental health, supporting someone, helping someone get food or this, that, whatever, I shoot it out to all of my partners. And I think that's the same approach that even students can have during this time, is that when they hear about supportive groups that exist on the mental health topic, or how to build your capacity to be compassionate, and then they have that and they shoot it out to their friends, you're also strengthening and helping one another during this really crazy time where teachers would used to be the ones to kind of push that envelope. Now you're taking that information and you're spreading it. Just like in my position, I'm getting that information and I'm giving it to clinicians and therapists to pass on to their families that they're meeting with. And so this is really a time of coming together. And this is that public health approach that the doctor was talking about earlier, is that we need all hands on deck. And you guys are a part of those hands that are going to make this time more encouraging and more uplifting for your average everyday student that's experiencing this time.
Well, I want to thank you all for sharing. And now it's time for our last question. This is just for all panelists. We're just asking for any final advice or final words just to leave with the youth. So I guess we'll start with Ms. Gray, because she's the first one on my screen.
I think just give yourself permission to, it's okay not to be okay sometimes. But when that not being okay lasts for a long time, reach out for help. I also think our youth today are going to be probably the most resilient generation we have ever seen, because you have had to adapt to so much and so quickly. Well, we didn't have the internet. That's how old I am. But I'm not sure we would have been able to adapt as quickly as you guys are. And despite all the challenges, our youth today and our students today are creating these opportunities out of these challenges that are just remarkable. This youth voice that is just so powerful right now is amazing. It's inspiring. And I don't know if this would have happened if all of these challenges hadn't happened all at once to kind of force the issues. But you guys are just unbelievable. It's amazing what you've had to deal with and how you've risen to the occasion.
Thank you, Ms. Gray. Ms. Corbin?
So for me, I want to kind of leave it with this. I want to leave a little bit of a challenge out there for all the youth. I want to challenge everybody to pay it forward and check on somebody. To ask that question, are you okay? Can I do anything for you? Asking it several times for someone you're concerned about. I think that's how we do this. We make change by doing small things to check on others. This is a time where we have to do it. I think Catherine's right. You guys are the most resilient. You're going to come out of this being able to have better coping, better ways to do things, to check on people. But we need to do that now, because this is the most important time. We're about a month into school. We need to make sure that our friends are okay. And so I think I'm going to leave you guys with, and everybody out there with, let's try to pay it forward and check on somebody and make sure everybody's okay. And if not, get them the help they need, offer them support.
Thank you, Ms. Corbin. You know, just because we have to stay apart doesn't mean we really have to be, we have to stay apart mentally, right? We got to be alone together. Mr. Vogelin?
Absolutely.
Yeah, my piece of advice is just, and this would be at any time, but I think especially now, is just to have balance. I think with all the things going on, it's important to balance the things that are important in your life and make sure that you're not doing too much of one thing. Make sure that you're balancing your academics, you're balancing those relationships in your life, you're balancing those times for yourself, you're getting the sleep you need, and that balance will be what will allow you to be successful no matter what challenge you face. So I think that's especially pertinent to what you're facing right now. So just and that'll allow you to be a successful adult, because believe me, all the adults on this panel, we all struggle with balance, and I'm sure we've struggled, for years and years, but when we do have balance in our lives, that's when we're the most successful.
Thank you, Mr. Vogelin. Mr. Ford?
You know, one of the things that I say often to people is in challenging times, the light shines the brightest in the darkness. And I think that this is a time where I believe that the youth is shining like never before in a crazy time. And this event that we're putting on right now, this conversation that we're having right now, it is so bright because it is so needed and so many will benefit from this conversation. And I also, want to bring attention to the fact of, us remembering that if we're here right now and we're in this space, that's because we're meant to be here and we're meant to be a light. And I think that sometimes we can get caught up in everything that's going around us and not forget, well, wait a minute, if I'm here, I also can give to this space in a positive way and find comfort that I'm valuable, I'm important, that I have the ability to really bring a positive change where I'm at. So I just want to leave that with you all, that you guys are such a light during this dark time. And I encourage you to continue to do that and to share that with your friends, that they too are lights during this time as they push this agenda of supporting one another when it comes to mental health.
You know what they say, this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. Thank you, Mr. Ford. Dr. Kalyana Raman?
I'd say be kind to yourself, be kind to others. Sometimes the best grace we can give is to give ourselves a break, and recognize whether we're struggling today and tomorrow will be better, or it's been a while and it's not getting better. Either way, be kind to yourself and seek out help. But more importantly, I think, is being kind to others and recognizing that sometimes people need space or they need you closer. But listening to those cues and really paying attention, I think, is the grace we offer to others as well.
Well, thank you, Dr. Kalyana Raman. I think that was, just simple. Just be kind. Simple as that. Well, I want to thank all the panelists and the student facilitators for being involved in this really eye-opening and dynamic conversation. I hope tonight has given you at home insight and new skills on how to be more open about mental health. Mental health affects each and every one of us in different ways. It's time to break the stigma. It's time to realize that it's okay to not be okay, and that getting help can be as simple as just saying, I need help. And likewise, getting help for someone else can be as simple as just asking, are you okay? And doing it more than once. Together, we can start having more honest conversations about mental health. Once again, if you or a loved one is in crisis, please contact the Anne Arundel County Warm Line at 410-768-5522, and they will definitely connect you with the help and proper resources that you need. In the words of the late singer and songwriter Bill Withers, we all need somebody to lean on. Until next time, wash your hands, wear a mask, and make sure you reach out to somebody. Good night.